Welcome to the Subjective Professor podcast, where we reject coercion and hypocrisy. This is episode 167, and we're going to talk about Matthew Garrett, a history professor at Bakersfield College uh, out in California. I'll say, first of all, that for whatever reason, my allergies are really bad this morning, and so you'll probably hear some pauses or some gaps in the recording because I have to pause it to clear my throat or to sneeze or something like that. So sorry about that. But in any case, so Matthew Garrett, most of the story I got from an article written by Sarah Weissman entitled A Free Speech Violation or Overdue Discipline. She also wrote that was in 2023. She wrote a follow-up piece just a few days ago when the settlement came through. So the current community college district lawsuit began in 2021. And as I said, he was fired in 2023. And the listed reason is that the school retaliated against him and a colleague for questioning whether grant money was being improperly used to fund woke social justice initiatives. I guess that the money was earmarked for certain activities, but it was redirected for certain social justice activities. I'll quote from the article. Garrett has been a polarizing figure on campus as co-founder of the Renegade Institute for Liberty, which describes itself as a faculty coalition dedicated to the free speech, open inquiry, critical thinking to advance American ideals within the broader Western tradition of meritocracy, individual agency, civic virtue, liberty of conscience, and free markets. Members of the group say it's intended to foster diversity of thought and good faith debate. Critics say some members have contributed to a hostile campus environment by making inflammatory posts on the group's social media page and stalling diversity initiatives by repeatedly questioning and criticizing them in committee meetings. He's been called immoral, unprofessional, dishonest, and having unsatisfactory performance. There are accusations of vandalism. He is described as a white supremacist by the Anti-Defamation League, and he held in an in-person event against the Cervasis protocols at some point, I guess when everyone was told to stay indoors and wear masks and all that other kind of silliness. He held an in-person event. A man after my own heart. So these were all attacks which apparently could not be substantiated. I guess there was no proof or support of the accusations that were being made. And then it goes on to say, Matt is a well-regarded tenured professor, Wilner said. So you can only imagine what an instructor, professor without tenure, or an adjunct faculty member thinks when they look at what's happened to him and say to themselves, all right, well, if something like this can happen to a Matt Garrett, who's been at Bakersfield College for 13 years and has tenure, why would I stick my neck out to teach how I want to teach and exercise my academic freedom? Goes on to say that Professor Garrett says, my goal is to return and continue to teach at Bakersfield College, he said. That's very much my intent. And I say to that, kudos to you, extremely brave. I would call that kind of brave. Probably something I wouldn't be able to do, at least in my former university. Anyway, after 5 years of administrative misconduct, a decisive courtroom display exonerated me of all allegations and exposed that Kern Community College District engaged in flagrant retaliation for my questioning of partisan policies and wasteful expenditures. And this was from the article, more recent article after he received his settlement. And if you read the details, it's not that he gets a lump sum 2.4 million because it is a community college. Funding does come from taxpayer dollars, at least in part. And so he gets something like just over $150,000 in back pay, etc. And let's see, in back pay benefits, and then he gets the rest of it paid out to him over the next 20 years, which is just like, okay, well, that's pretty much throwaway money, right? Because of inflation, the value of that is steadily going to decrease. But whatever. I think in terms of vindication and victory, that is priceless. So the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, FIRE, I think took on his case because they did comment on it, and I'm guessing they wouldn't comment on it unless they were actually taking his case. I submitted my case to them, but it's much simpler just to frame it as a breach of contract kind of situation. But in any case, my wife showed me that article and we were like, wow, wouldn't that be awesome to get $2.4 million settlement? It wasn't even like a judgment, it was a settlement because I guess to get it over with. Um, and I guess the school realized that they were going to lose big. So they agreed to settle. Uh, and because of that, it made it kind of easy to see that, yeah, it was a freedom of speech violation. Honestly, I believe that my situation also is a freedom of speech violation. However, the guy who failed to renew my contract or recommended that my contract not be renewed wrote his recommendation letter in such a way that he couldn't be accused of that. Or if you did try to go that route, it would be a very weak case. Just to sort of go over and touch and compare with what happened over in California, every class that I would teach, uh, I would have an intro video to the class. Like I used to do it on the first day of class, but because of all of the lockdowns and stuff, it became a video. And I realized that this was even better because you could publish the video before classes actually started. And so people who didn't want any part of the class, who didn't want to take a class with me, they could drop it. And then someone else who was in line could sign up for that class. And my waiting lists were pretty ridiculous, right? So there were only 28 seats in a class, and sometimes I would have 30 people on the waiting list. It was pretty cool. Anyway, so I wanted to shake the tree and sort of get rid of people who would only stir up trouble, like who refused to be open minded, and make space for people who really wanted to hear something different. So part of my introduction, and I was brutally honest, I said, that I was a Jesus freak, right? I was a conservative Christian among conservative Christians in a theological sense, right? So probably what most people will, the mental image of a conservative Christian would be a fundamentalist. I'm not that. What I am is what I would call a very conservative Christian in the sense that I believe that scripture is the word of God. But I said, I challenge you to sort of detect that in the teaching that you're about to receive, and most Christians, they can't tell, right? Because at least the way that I understand scripture is, very different from a lot of my colleagues, my peers, and other people in the church, which explains why my church is really, really small. But at the same time, we don't have a lot of the problems that other people have in other churches. Like we don't need to make sort of compromises or sort of make hypocritical statements when it comes to faith. And then I move on and I explain that I'm an anarcho-capitalist, and I explain what anarchy is, and I explain what capitalism is, right? So anarchy means that there is no leader over you. You choose what, principle, what ideology you're going to follow, and you live that way. And capitalism, all capitalism is freedom to buy and sell whatever you want to whoever wants to sell and buy whatever it is, right? So someone on the other side of that voluntary exchange. And from that, right, you have to take responsibility, you have to navigate, you have to make wise choices, you have to recognize that there's competition, right? And so I'd have that kind of summary in my intro video. And I did that every semester. And then in my program, there was a new director. And so I guess one of the students that took the class or signed up for the class saw the intro video, got triggered, in common parlance, right? That's what they would say. They got triggered. They emailed the program head, uh, after which I got a phone call and I was told to take down the video. And I asked repeatedly, what was the problem of the video? And all I was given, because, and I can tell this person is very experienced with this, and, just basically kept repeating like a robot, like a computer, like an automated response. All you have to do in your video is intro the books that you're going to read and your syllabus, period, So I thought that was interesting. And so in my head, I was like, well, okay, I'll do that. But I have to keep an eye on this guy because I think he is going to create problems for me. So after that, uh, you know, not after that, but the thing about that video was that it was a hook for most of the students who stayed in class. And keep in mind, in these days, there are perhaps very, very few, maybe you'll get one student in a class who might understand what capitalism is, right? So in an average class of, like, I also taught race classes in another department, and class size was about 50 students. Maybe you'll get one student who has ever heard of or learned about the free market prior to taking my class, right? So very few people have heard about the free market taught in the way that I would teach it. And so people were curious. And it was something so radically different from what the vast majority of other professors were teaching. Even I met one other professor who said he was small L libertarian, but I mean, I was much more radical than him. He was just more, low key, whereas I just wore it on my forehead. And so it interested students, especially students who were very tired of hearing the same old, white people are racist and evil, capitalism is evil, so we got to do this. But it's the same solution that everyone else is saying. So it gets boring after a while. There has to be more. And so a lot of people just naturally started getting hungry to hear something different. And so most of the students in my class were socialists. Some of them were openly communist, right? I remember one of the last semesters I taught two were, I suspected, were participants in the Antifa riots and BLM riots. So they were very much militantly opposed to me. But the fact that they stayed in the class meant that they were curious. They wanted to know what it would be like to debate in a classroom with someone who is clearly aligned in the opposite position. So so it was my hook. It was my hook to get students in, to get curious, to want to learn something, especially want to learn something in a class that is required of them, right? It was a required class for graduation, and everyone hates those classes. So I decided that it was my mission to make this the most interesting class they would ever take. And so I taught it in a way where they would hear new solutions, to understand really what empowerment was. Like, empowerment is not joining some kind of social justice movement, where the gains or the victories are vague and amorphous and intangible and only in word, right? There is no actual benefit from the policies and the activities of that organization. So I wanted to talk about real empowerment, empowerment for the individual. And that got a lot of people curious, right? They didn't have to follow someone else. They could be the author and the captain of their own ship. Um, the people who hate this, however, are the people who cannot have an open debate. They don't want to debate. They don't want to discuss their ideas in comparison with other ideas, because then it becomes obvious that their ideas are the worst ideas. So you have to cancel, you have to ban, you have to censor all opposing thought. Uh, so I got a positive response from students who wanted to learn, but I got disgust from people who believed that they had the right way to live, right? Your typical uh, pro-democracy person, right? And as I explained in a couple episodes ago, democracy only has one political party. A true democracy, there's only one party. Everyone else is a criminal. Everyone else who has a different opinion are criminalized, and there's arrested, they disappear from society, etc. And so people who are upset at the free market ideas are those people who cannot engage in an open debate. That's why they yell at you, that's why they scream at you, that's why they have a 2 hour long speech of questions that they give you no time to respond, right? And so they try to overwhelm you and drown you out, um, because they can't have any kind of response, because they can't answer any specific questions, right? Because then all of their contradiction, all of the inconsistency, all of the hypocrisy will be revealed. So to engage in this fight that Professor Garrett was victorious in is a war of patience, right? Because the truth, or better ideas, free market ideas, require lots of time to be able to understand and also to see play out in life. So it requires patience. It requires a honest desire to learn. Uh, but also, if you're going to engage in this fight, it requires clean living, right? What do I mean by that? Well, you can't be a hypocrite yourself. You can't say, oh, yeah, yeah, like a lot of rhinos, Republicans in name only. These people, their lives are full of contradiction. Lives are basically full of misrepresentation, misinformation, call it whatever you want. And so when it comes time for them to do something important, then all of their garbage gets dug up, right? All the skeletons in their closet comes out. Now, I have a lot of skeletons in my closet. I freely admit that, which is why I don't take the much more aggressive approach that Professor Garrett did. Because I can't. My life is not that clean. I have problems in my past, and I'm always afraid that they will come up. And so for me, it was always about de-escalation. It's always trying to show and introduce people how to solve their problems, never to tell them what their solution is, but to give them the means through which they can work through their issues. And this can be used by anyone, right? Anyone, no matter what your ideology is, you can use this pattern, this method that I would teach, right? Which is based on this whole knowledge production idea, and then figuring out what the box looks like, right? What your own mental restrictions and what your own mental box looks like. And then you can figure out a way to get out of your box, right? So that was something that anyone can use from any starting point to get to a better place, right? That was the approach that I had. But of course, what that meant was it undermined all of the social justice warriors' goals and agenda, right? It undermined all of their methodology of violence and destruction. And they couldn't have that, right? You needed to have people burn the city down. You can't have people telling other people why that's not a very good way about going things, that there are better ways, there are better solutions, less harmful, less destructive, less expensive ways of doing things, which have a much better result. right? So um, I knew it was going to be a problem, teaching what I did. So I taught in such a way that it was beyond reproach. So they would have to look at my method, not me, right? And so there were too many weaknesses in me, but very few weaknesses in the principles that I was teaching. So what I had to do was I had to be very careful and mindful of the rules and the restrictions of the department. And so, there were previous directors who told me in evaluation, performance evaluation reviews, that I adhered to the rules of the program better than most other professors. And we had like 100 professors in that program, right? But I knew that I had to adhere to the letter of the law, as it were, so that I was beyond reproach. But they got me anyway, and I'm hoping now that the truth will out. We have to remember through this decision of $2.4 million that bad moves, bad decisions are expensive, right? They're extremely expensive. Like you shouldn't have done that. And it's costly. And so if you knew this was going to be the result, then you wouldn't have done it. Right. But so we need to have these precedents. We need to have these cases come to this conclusion so that people won't do it in the future. So the cost of bad decisions must be revealed. And the only reason why they haven't been so far is because you know, burying them, covering them is fueled by the Fed. I mean, they just print all this money. And so now you can bribe all these people to stay silent. You can pay people to become enforcers and policemen and punishers of people who step out of line. And that includes funding to universities, which they can abuse and misallocate, misspend. And so having more cases like this and publicizing it makes the cost of bad choices sort of impossible to ignore. And hopefully it'll help me in my own personal fight here on the other side of the country, when that court case, when that arbitration hearing finally meets and I get to have my day in court, as they say. But anyway, I just wanted to celebrate Professor Garrett, congratulate him on his victory. And I do hope that he continues to fight the fight in the way that he does. And hopefully that will inspire a lot of people to pursue the similar kind of fight for freedom, fight for critical thinking, the right way, the free way, the open minded way, in a variety of ways. Like, so I'm doing pretty much the same thing. People don't call me a white supremacist because I'm not white. But, to me, that would be a mark of a badge of honor to receive that kind of criticism. But anyway, so hopefully his court decision will inspire a lot of other people to have the same goal for freedom and for better information, aka the truth, in a variety of ways, so diverse that the opposition won't know how to defeat it. And that's the beauty of the free market, right? They're just too creative, too innovative, that these socialistic minded people just cannot keep up. So anyway, it was a very hopeful news story. It was encouraging and inspiring to me. Uh, and so I just hope that it's also does the same for you. I will talk to you next time.